learn. We're on Daf Chav Daled Amud Aleph. We're at the Mishnah, and you're in for a real treat tonight. Not because of the shiur that I'm giving, but because of what the Gemara has to say. Really amazing. And you'll see what I mean in a minute. I'm going to give you a Hanukkah gift. You have no idea what's coming. Dmut Surot Livana Hayula l'Rabban Gamliel B'Tavla Uvakota Baliato Shebehen Mareda Had Yotod VeOmer Hakazera Ita O Kazeh. We learned this Mishnah already last time. There were images of the moon, various phases of the moon, various appearances of the moon, and models of the moon that were inscribed both on some kind of a tablet, that's the tavla, maybe a table, maybe some flat top, and also on the wall in the upper chamber of Rabban Gamliel. And he would ask the commoners, meaning the people who would come, having claimed to have seen the moon, what did they see? And he would quiz them, and he would ask that based on those models. The Gemara now opens as follows. Umishare, is that really permissible? Are you allowed to have pictures, images that you're making of what could potentially be called graven images? Is that allowed? So the Gemara quotes, V'haktiv, we have a pasuk, Lo ta'asun iti. Where's that pasuk found? At the end of Parashat Yitro. Lo ta'asun iti Elohei chasef, ve'Elohei zahav, lo ta'asu lachem. End of Parshat Yitro, Perek Chaf, toward the end. So you're not allowed to make from me, out of me, for me, something like that. And that's something like that as part of the Gemara's discussion. You may not, the Braita learns, Lo ta'asun kidmut shimshai. Do not make like any of my helpers. The word shemesh means one who's like a shamash. We're going to like the shamash. The shemesh means one who is a servant, right? So don't make it something in that image. Amar Abaye. So Abaye says, Lo asra Torah ella shamash and shef shalasot kimotan. When the Torah forbade this, it means you're not allowed to make something that you could make an exact replica of it. Kidatanya, as we learned in the Braito, Lo yaseh Adam bayit tavnit heichal. Right? Don't make the house that is in the model, the modality of the sanctuary of the Beit HaMikdash. Achsadra tavnit ulam. Don't make a portico that looks like the ulam. What's the ulam? The heichal is the actual building of the Beit HaMikdash. The ulam could be construed by Cheney, it was this way, was like an elongated sort of, looked like a capital T. The building looked like a capital T upside down. If you were looking at it from the sky, you were standing in the east, you'd be looking west. There's an outer chamber called the ulam, and it looks apparently like a portico, like a porch. So don't build a porch that looks like the ulam. We'll get into this in a minute. This is first reading.
Seems obvious that they're afraid that people are going to worship the sun, but worship in
So that's an important question. This pasuk, Lo ta'asun iti Elohei chesed Elohei zahav, Lo ta'asu lachem, comes on the heels of the mitzvah Lo ta'aseh regarding avodah zarah. Lo yelecha Elohim acherim al panai v'chulei v'chulei, and it mentions up and down and all different things. So what's that pasuk? Therefore, something else is being conveyed that was not yet known from the second Aseret HaDibrot. What is that? It must be something else. So this Braita, Abaye notes that when the Torah said that, it didn't refer, this is Abaye's first claim, it didn't refer to an Isser on making an image of the sun and the moon. It referred to not making something that is an exact replica of the Beit HaMikdash. Chatzer keneged azara, don't make a courtyard that is the same dimensions as the courtyard of the Mikdash. Shulchan keneged shulchan, menorah keneged menorah.
But how do they do that today?
What?
They've already started to build.
Right, so that's a real question. Who gave them the right? There's a little bit of a controversy there. Who told them, the Machon HaMikdash, they are building different kalim and different things. So it's a bit of a question, right? So
But are they only talking about the life size model?
So that's gonna. But what Ronnie was making the point. Yeah, it seems to be only life size model. But Ronnie's making the point. Machon HaMikdash, they are building the kalim. They do want it to be ready for when Mashiach comes. But Lo ta'asun, don't make it, right? unless you argue that don't make it means don't make it as an ornament, don't make it as as a copy for your home. But if you're doing it for educational purposes and possibly even to practice so you're ready when the time comes, maybe that's not the same thing.
Okay.
Well, but if
Maybe.
that-
I didn't say it is or isn't. That's just saying maybe.
Yeah, okay, but
Let's
if
keep
that-
going.
But if that's the case, there's no objection to the charts that they're showing them for the.
Okay, so let's keep going. Right. But Abaye is responding to the initial question of the Gemara. Is it permissible to have these things all together? Sorry, is it allowed? Yeah. By the way, if you look at the last Rashi on the page, Gemara, Lota Suniti, Tsurot Haumdimiti, images of that which is standing with me. What does that mean? So standing with me, maybe it means to use the modern parlance, the portal of entry to be connected to Hashem. The best spot in the world is Har HaBayit, is the Beit HaMikdash. So don't make something that's with me. So the Gemara is going to now go into some other options, but don't make a menorah keneged menorah. Aval oseh shel chamisha v'shel shisha v'shel shmona. You can make it out of 5 branches, 6-branched candelabra, an 8-branch candelabra. Sound familiar? V'shel shiv'a lo yasa afilu shel shar minim atachot. But if you make it of 7, don't even make it don't make a 7-branched menorah, even from other kinds of metals. Yeah. Why would you think that you could make it out of any other kind of metal? Would that actually be kosher? Rashi, top line. V'afilu shel shar minim atachot. Lefi shekiyotze bahen keshera lifnim. Kidatanya, as we learned in the Gemara in Menachot, because the truth is, even in the Heichal, technically, as we're going to learn right now, you could make the menorah. If you couldn't make it out of gold, you could make it out of another metal. How do we know this, says Rashi? He's quoting the Gemara in Menachot and Daf Chav Chet, Vasita menorat. At the beginning of the pasuk, you should make the menorah. That's a klal. We just said this morning. Klal ufrat uchlal iatadan ella ke'ein haprat. If you have a klal, prat and klal next to each other, a general statement, a specific detailed statement, and then a general statement, you will judge it according to the ke'ein, means not exactly like the prat that's in the middle of the sandwich, but we're in the family of the prat. So, vasita menorat klal, zahav tahor prat, miksher or miksha?
Yeah.
Miksha, teaseh, hazar uchlal, ma prat miforash, shel matachet, afkol shel matachet. As the prat mentions, the menorah should be made out of zahav tahor. Don't think it means exactly, only, exclusively pure gold. It really means any metal would work. Why? Because it's the rule. Klal ufrat uchlal, iatadan ela ke'ein haprat. But not exactly the prat. So what is ke'ein haprat? Any metal. So if you have a 7-branch candelabra that you want to make for your museum, for your living room, for I don't know what, for your social hall in your shul, or even in the front of the shul, you want a 7-branch candelabra and you want to make it out of another kind of metal, the Gemara here says, nothing doing. That's part of lotasun iti, that which is omeid iti. Now it's not, what does it mean omeid iti? In the Makom HaMikdash. Now comes Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda. Fasten your seatbelts. Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda Omer, Af shel eitz lo yaseh, kederach she'asu malchei beit chashmonoi. You should not make it out of wood either, in the manner that was made by the kings in the time of Chanukah. Apparently, they made a menorah, according to Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda, out of wood. Look at Rashi, last of the wide lines in Rashi, on the top, 4th line, 5th line, what is it, 4th line? Af shel eitz lo yaseh, shekiyotze ba'kshera lifnim, because things that are made even of wood would also be kosher inside. Why? Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda Darish Le Likra Beribui Umiut. Instead of klal ufrat uklal, he has another structure called ribui and miut. And when you have a ribui and a miut, so you'll see right now. So he reads it as ribui umiute. Where are we? Yeah, Darish Le Likra Beribui Umiute. My Rabbi, Rabbi Kolbile. Right, Ravi, my Ravi. Sorry, what does it come to include when it says Vasita Menorat? It means all materials. Umay miet, what's the miut in the middle? So he sees not klal fradachlai, he sees riboy, miut, and riboy. So the miut in the middle has a very limited a limitation, the miut. Umay miet cheres. When you look in the Gemara Menachot, the argument is there's a Tanakama. Tanakama holds klal fradachlai iyatad in a prat. Since the prat in the middle was zahav tahor, that tells you it has to be in the family of zahav. What else in the family of zahav? All metals. Rabbi Yosef Yehuda says no. It's a riboy and a miut. Riboy, miut, and riboy. The miut essentially canceled out. We take one small little amount left over from the miut, and we'll keep that. So when it says zahav tahor, what does it mean? You could use, according to Rabbi Yosef Yehuda, any material would be kosher as the menorah. Therefore, you cannot build your menorah with 7-branched candelabra out of any material unless it's made out of pottery. Because cheres clay is so low down on the totem pole, it's so low that that wouldn't be a kosher one. Kederach she'asu malchei beit chashmonai. Here we are, Rashi. Kshegavra yadam al yevanim v'hotzium miYerushalayim v'tiaru ad mikdash v'hayu aniyim v'lo yachlu la'asota shel zahav. According to this view, not everyone agrees, but according to this view, in the Gemara, they took over, they conquered Yerushalayim from the Greeks, got them out of Yerushalayim, and discovered that the Mikdash had been plundered, not just defiled, but plundered, and there is no menorah, and to build a new menorah. So they were so poor, they had no way to make it out of gold. So what did they make it out of? Wood. And Rabbi Yosef Yehuda says it was kosher. Back into the Gemara, the Chachamim disagreed with that. Line 5, Amru lo, they said to Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda, Misham Raya? Is that really a proof? Because really, what did they use? The Chashmonaim, and they agree that the Mikdash was plundered, that there was no more menorah, but rather Shpudin shel barzel hayu v'chipum ba'atz. What is ba'atz? Tin, bedil. They made it out of iron poles, and they covered it in tin, so it would look a little bit like silver. But apparently, the tin, it's called ba'atz. They use that's the expression, like the word eitz, because when it gets faded and tarnished, it looks like wood. So people thought it was wood. It wasn't really made of wood. How say you cannot make a menorah out of wood? It has to be made out of a metal. The metal was iron. It was covered in tin. And then it describes Hashir when they got rich, they were wealthier.
Tin is also metal.
But it was also the shpudei barza. The shpudei barza, the iron rods, and then covered in tin. Right, so it's all metal. Yeah, that's the point. So Hashiru asaum shel kasef. Once they became wealthier, the community was wealthier, they replaced it with silver, a silver menorah. Chazru Hashiru asaum shel zahav. Then they replaced it and they made it out of gold. I mean, this is just an astounding idea, no? I mean, according to the opinions, both opinions here, there's no menorah when they get there. They have to build a new one. Either they made it out of wood because they were poor, or they made it out of rods. Thank you. And they covered it, they ensconced it and robed it in tin. And later on, they made a new one, and then they made a new one. It's not the Hanukkah I remember from my childhood. They came in and there was a menorah, right? And you can make a case, not like this Gemara. They're not still there. It's just they were matame. Take your pick. What actually happened? There's an argument right here. Was it eitz? Was it really bedil, the ba'atz that was covering it? It's hard to know. I have more to say on the subject, and we'll come back to it in a couple minutes. Let's go a little farther in the Gemara. Okay, so we'll cover a little bit of ground. But it's just like this is just a fascinating idea. So I just gave you a Hanukkah gift, yeah. The Gemara gave you a Hanukkah gift. You have already Dvar Torah for the first night.
How does aluminum foil form?
It's Taka question.
They didn't have it back then.
There was no aluminum foil, but it was like they covered it in aluminum foil.
But they had aluminum.
Hmm?
But they had aluminum.
I don't think so.
Tin.
So tin.
Tin.
Tin isn't aluminum.
No, tin is not actually.
Tin's from tin.
Tin is tin. It's its own element.
I don't think Israel has any bauxite.
Yeah, aluminum comes later. Aluminum was not invented at that time. I believe aluminum was invented later. The point is, there's a certain economic reality that even in victory, they had to contend with. They just couldn't afford. Could they not have a menorah? They had a menorah. They built it.
What's
So-
become Tomek?
That's a discussion also. No, but the Marsha is going to take, because I brought you the Marsha. But if you make a clay kibble in it, then that changes things. So,
Okay.
and you need a clay kibble because otherwise, how are you holding the oil? So something's going on. But let's you want to leave the off ramp or let's do a little more Gemara. Then we'll circle back to this because it's a fascinating sugya. It really is a fascinating sugya. By the way, the Shpudim Shel Barzel, let's do quickly the Tosfot right here on the top of the page. It's a very short one. Hadakarle Shpudim. It's called rods. Excuse me. Iron rods. Mishum shlohayu gavim kaftorim ufrachim. Elim kain ba zahav. Kid'ita ba'kometz rabba. The Gemara also Menachot on Chavchet points out that if you make the menorah out of another metal, there's no requirement for the ornamental flowers and knobs that were on the golden menorah. It was just a much more pashut looking thing.
Really hard to make roses and stuff out of a piece of iron.
Right.
It
But
doesn't get formed.
yeah, and you need it to be miksha, so it's not going to happen.
Well,
Yeah, it'd be quite the welding job.
And it wouldn't, and it's not out of one piece then.
right.
Yeah, that'd be harder. Yeah. So anyway, that's yeah. By the way, the Shpurin Shel Barzel means it was rods of iron. So did they melt the whole thing down and make it into the shape to be miksha, or does it mean they like somehow strung it together and tied it up? I don't know. Like were they welding pieces together? It's not. That's not miksha. So I'm not even clear on that as of now. But Tzarech Iyam. Let's go back to the Gemara. So this is amazing over here. So the Gemara says that then eventually made it out of gold, right?
Mhm.
So the Gemara asks, okay, wait a minute. You made a case just now, Abaye, that what you're not allowed to make an image of means you're not allowed to replicate things that are the portal, my language, between Shemaim and Aretz, meaning from the Beit HaMikdash. But that implies that to make pictures of the sun and the moon, that's okay, right? If you can't make something of that size, because how can you make an exact replica of the sun and the moon? You have to be to scale. That's not going to work. It'll be a different size. That's not going to work, right? Vatanya lotasuniti. The Braita says lotasun kidmut shimshai hamishamshim lefane b'maram. Don't make in the image, even if it's different size, in the dimensions of that which serves me on high. Amar Abaye, so Abaye explains, what does this mean? Now, second attempt, if you will. Lo asra Torah el dmut arba'a panim b'hadeh hadadeh. The Isser really here means those who are mishamish mi b'maram doesn't mean sun and moon. It refers instead to the celestial beings that are described at the beginning of Sefer Yechezkel, the Ma'aser Merkava, which is a description, among other things, about the four facets that are on the Chayot, a kind of malach. So that's what you're not allowed to make, right? Because the word shimshai could mean shemesh yareach, but shimshai could also be furniture in the Beit HaMikdash, or shimshai might be the angels. Don't you see the language is imagery that appears in the Navi? You might think, Chagall might think, I could draw the pictures of the angels. You mustn't do that. You mustn't do that. Beferish halacha that this is imagery, it's language. So Dibator Koloshim Bnei Adam, but there's no physicality to these elements. So the minute you make a physical representation of the Seichel Anivdal of the Malachim, you're in violation of this halacha. Yeah. So maybe that's what it is. Ela dmut arba panim b'harei adadeh. Yeah. Now, by the way, what's the arba panim? So the Chayot are described as having four faces: the Pnei HaShor, the Pnei HaAdam, Pnei HaAryeh, and Pnei HaNesher. Four different sides. So the Gemara says, well, Elamiata, parts of Adam Lechudei Tisterei. According to that logic, that the problem is you mustn't make all four, so that makes it sound like making the face of a human being would be okay and permissible. Alama Tanya Kola Partsufot Mutarin Chutzmi Partsuf Adam. We have another Braita, however, that teaches directly you can make all the faces of different animals, different creatures for art, whatever, but not the face of a human being. That's what the Gemara says. So, if you just told me that the reason why the Torah said what it said about Lota Suniti was because of the Demut Arba Panim Bahade Hadade, the four facets, and one of those is the human face. So then why do I need another Braita telling me all the parts sufot are permissible? If you want to stop make an eagle, or you want to make a lion, you go to, what is it, Keser Marav Anshe Luknik?
Yeah.
You ever been inside of the Aron Kodesh? You ever see the Aron Kodesh in Megatzer Marav? So you know what I'm talking about. So clearly somebody said you allowed, because it's called Partsuf and Mutarin. But the face of a human being, that you can't do. Now, we're not going to go into it tonight. There's a halachic sugya here, a shear in and of itself, the difference between relief versus a flat two-dimensional image. There might be a chiluk there. There actually is a chiluk there. But if you go to Kesser Marav, it's looking right back at you. The eagle is right there on the top. So, where do they get it? So, okay. It's the American eagle, it's this eagle, the eagle from Luknik or something. Okay. The Luknikian eagle. I've never asked the Rabbi Lazovsky, but it's probably asked. Okay. So, Amarav Huna Brei, the Rav Idi. Pirke de Abaye Shmili, from the Shiurim I heard from Abaye, what I understood is, Lo tasun iti means lo tasun oti. What it means is don't make me. Why? Because in the description in Sefer Yechezkel, it makes it seem like there's a Dmut Adam sitting on the Kisei HaKavod. Again, it's imagery, it's not literal. There would be, later on in Jewish history, very sadly, a group of Jews who would seek to make an entire religion out of this. And the Jews always said, that's idolatry. We don't believe in such a thing. But one of their sources is the beginning of the book of Yechezkel. It's imagery that Yechezkel sees. Yeah. So the Torah reminds us this is all imagery because a human being imagines things, and because the prophetic transmissions involved imagery, but it wasn't like a hologram. It's not something you can touch or should be trying to replicate. So here, when it says "Lotosun iti," so this Talmud here, Rav Huna Bered, Rav Idi said, I heard in the Shir means "Lotasun oti." Ushma, but the Gemara asks, "Ushar shamashin mishari v'hatanya lo tasun iti lo tasun kidmut shimshai hamshamshin lefanei b'maram kigon ofanim usrafim v'chayot hakodesh umalachei hasharet." Don't make representations of those, either described in the Navi, in Yeshaya Perak Vav, in Yechezkel Perak Aleph, that they have wings, the Seish Kanafayim. Don't do that. That's the halacha psuka in the Gemara. Amar Abaye lo asra Torah ela shamashin shebemadura elyon v'shem madura tachto and mishari. So what was forbidden by the Torah was the shamashin who are in the upper sphere of Shamayim, meaning in the supernal realm. That's not physical, meaning the angels of varying sorts. That's what you can't make images. The Gemara says, what? Does that mean you think that those who are lower, i.e., the physical shamashim, shemesh, and yarech, you're allowed to make a representation of? Vatana, didn't we learn? Where did we learn this? In the second, the Aseret Hadibrot. Asher b'shamayim, right? Lo ta'aseh lecha fesel v'chol tmuna asher b'shamayim imal, right? V'asher ba'aretz mitachat, right? V'asher b'mayim mitachat la'aretz. It's right there. It's right there. So what are you telling me? Asher b'shamayim l'rabot chama u'levana kochavim u'mazalot. Right? Mimal, why did it also add the word mimal? L'rabot malachei hasharet. To include also that. Yeah. So as a last resort, because it's kind of backed into a corner, the Gemara says, well, kitanya ha'i ovdam. It's about worshiping them. That's the problem. Yeah. So ila ovdam, afil shilshul kat nami. Right? You can't even worship a tiniest little insect, the little gnat. You can't worship. So it's obvious that the Torah doesn't have to go into details about that. So inachinami, the Tanya Asher ba'aretz l'rabot harim ugvaot yamim unaharot afikim v'gayot mitachat l'rabot shilshul katan. Right. So the fact that the Torah went out of its way to shir ba'aretz, you can't worship any of these parts of nature. And mitachat means the lower down means even the gnat. Right. So the Gemara says, wait, v'asiya greateta, because it says in that pasuk, right? Lo ta'aseh lecha. Don't make for yourself an idol out of these things. V'asiya greateta mishare. But if you were making it not for the purpose of worship, but just because you were making it, is that really allowed? V'atanya lo ta'asun iti, lo ta'asun kidmut shimshayim shamshin lefanai kigon chama ulevana kochavim umazalot. So now, I mean, you could always ask this good question, like, if the Gemara already had this Braita, why do I have to go through the whole excursus to get to this last Braita that says explicitly, when the words Lota Suniti means, don't make anything in the image of those who serve me, right? Such as sun, moon, stars, and constellations. Don't do that. So now we have a problem, because it says the Mishnah Rabban Gamliel did exactly that. The first question of the Gemara was, Umi Share? Abai said, well, it's only forbidden here, it's only forbidden there, but in the end, kind of back to the corner, realized Yeah, you're not allowed to make these things. So what about Rabban Gamliel? He had them, clearly. So Shani Rabban Gamliel de Acherim Asulo, because non-Jews made them for him. He didn't make them himself. Someone else made them for him. He just had them. He owned them, but he didn't make them. Lo ta'aseh. Lo ta'aseh. L'chafesel.
Could
But
it
someone
also-
else made it? It's on the guy. He
Could
didn't
it
do it.
also be that you cannot not make the image of the entire thing that we see as opposed to a sliver?
Yes. That is halach. You already must have heard a shir on it, or you just have great halach intuition. Right. There's a right. Right. The halach is a coloring book, if you will. No, it's
I
true.
must have learned it and forgotten.
Man, it's okay, but anamnesis, what the non-Jews call, we call it, just it's from when you were in the Gemara needed Daf Lamed. You were, that's it. You had the Ner Daluk, it's still burning, so you remember. But that is what it is. That's if you show a piece of it missing or something like that, so you haven't completely made it. So you didn't really draw it as such.
So that's why the pictures without one of the ears showing or
Yeah,
something
yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah. Right. V'ha Rav Yehuda da'acherim asulo. V'amar le Shmuel Rav Yehuda shinina same ene didan the Dane. All right. So if that's true, if the non-Jews made it, it's okay. So how come Shmuel said to Rav Yehuda, smart one, like brilliant one, go blind the eyes of that thing? Meaning he had some kind of an image somehow that came into this Talmud's possession. He told him, go blind its eye, rub out the eye on the statue. So hatam chotamo bolei tava, umishum chasada. There, the problem was that what was sticking out, this image, was not a statue, but it was a ring. The ring had a relief on it. When you looked at the ring, there was a little replica of a person's face protruding. So once you had that, then he told him, scratch it out, scratch out the eyes. Umishum chasada. And it was this for the sake of, because of suspicion. Kiretanya tabat chotamo boleit asur lahanicha. You mustn't wear such a ring. Umutar lachtom ba. Right? How come? How come you could use it as a stamp in wax? Because chotamo shokeya. Because you would push it into the wax, the image it would make would be one of engraving, right? As opposed to something embossed. Mutar lahanicha. So, mutar lachtom ba chotamo. Sorry. Period. Shokeya. If in the ring it was sunken into it, mutar lahanicha. You could wear such a ring, but you can't use it as a stamp. Why? Because when you push it into you then made the image of the face sticking out. Are we really worried about chashada that someone's going to see that you're wearing such a ring, or you're in the presence of such a piece of imagery, and you're going to think that person's worshiping it? There was the famous shul of Shav Yativ in Naharda. There was a work of art. There was a bust of probably one of the Roman leaders. They all davened in that place. Nobody was worried about chashad, that there's somebody they were worshiping it or bowing to it or whatever. So the Gemara says, no, Rabim shining. When it's in public, a public place like that, everybody understands why it's there. It's a legal thing. It's part of the government. They insisted on having it there. Nobody thinks you're actually worshiping it. It's in public. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Gamliel yachidhu. So Rabbi Gamliel is an individual though, so you can't get out of it by saying, well, okay, but no, Keva and the Nasihu, Shrichi Rabim Gabe. Since he's a Nasi, many people were in his presence all the time, and it's like Rabim, and nobody thought he was worshiping the pieces that are there. Yeah. Ibaid Ema, some say the Prakim Hava, that he was it was somehow in parts, something like that, right? V'yibaid emel hitlamed avad, that he did it, he really made it for the sake of, the prakim, by the way, means it was like in pieces, and somehow he would like assemble it, or something like that. Yeah. Now I don't know what the sections is. Is it on blocks, and he just pushes the blocks together? Is it a 3D model that he's connecting? I don't fully understand what it means. If you have a footnote there, I'd appreciate it. I wasn't sure. Prakim means in pieces, in sections,
Which
but
Rabbi Gamliel assembled only for the duration of the examination.
yeah, and you would take it apart again,
Since
right?
Yeah, these sections were kept unassembled. People do not seem in possession of an assembled
Yeah.
image of the moon.
But is it on
Remain-
blocks or is it a
I'm
model?
trying to get there.
It's so big, it needs to be done in parts.
That I wasn't sure what the exact
It
idea was.
does
Anyway,
not say.
okay, so I'm curious myself. Is it a 3D model or more likely is it like it's two flat panels and he pushes them together to make the image? I don't know.
Be so big that it needed to be made.
Oh, it could be.
In parts.
Yeah, it could be. Could be. So Vibait Ema Hitla made Avad. He made these things, and here's the key line at the end. It was made for the purpose of study. Uchtiv lo tilmad la'asot. We have an express pasuk in Sefer Dvarim. Ki ata ba el haaretz asher Hashem Elokecha notein lach lo tilmad la'asot ketoavot hagoyim haim. Don't learn to do the abominations of these nations. Aval talamed lehavin ulhorot. You can't learn about avodah zarah or about these things for the purpose of worshiping them or doing something with them, but if it's the purpose of learning and understanding and to teach to others, that you can do. And that's what Gamliel was doing.
It says also there could have been a problem because he had different sections, but at some point he had to make it all together into one piece and then cut them up.
That it started that way and then he cut it up. Interesting. I wasn't aware of that. Okay. Also, very good. Very good. So this is a basic run through of the sugya, which brings us to a little gift for Hanukkah to go with the Gemara. It's a good gift. Send it around.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the Marsha on Bava Madlikin. I have the Aruch LaNer scanned, but I don't have the Marsha. It's the Marsha on the Gemara of Hanukkah that everybody knows so well, where it refers to the idea that the enemy came in with Timu Kol Hashmanim. They defiled all of the oil. So this is the Maharsha's take, and you'll see there's a give and take because there's a lot of mystery about this, right? Why is it an 8-day festival? So one of the answers, among many answers, the Beit Yosef's question, there's like 150 something answers. So what was the issue according to Maharsha? It would take 8 days to make pure oil. All right, because everyone was ritually impure. They were Tamei Meitim. They were in the presence of dead bodies because they encountered dead bodies. They fought in wars. To the Sefer Mitzvah Gadol, V'ayin Sham, B'Re'em, B'ma Hayu Hanochrim Metamin. There, the Re'em discusses how exactly the non-Jews were Metame. Gam Katav Sham, Kevin, Lo Dehayu Kulan, Tmei Meitim, Heachid Liko Menorah. If they're all Tmei Meitim, how are they lighting the menorah? They're impure. They found pure oil. It's very nice, but they're impure. Hooray! Timu et Hashemen bad lakatan. As soon as they would touch the oil, if you're impure, if you're tamei and you touch the oil, right?
But they don't get paraduma water. They don't go to.
It would take 7 days.
No, for goy.
This isn't goy.
Oh,
No. The point is when the Jews came,
oh,
the
yeah.
Nochrim, the
Right.
Nochrim were already matameyet,
Okay.
right? So they're cool on Tmei Meitim.
Right.
So how could they light the menorah? Even the Jews getting there would destroy it. It's a tahor status as soon as they would touch it because they were Tmei Meitim themselves.
Yeah.
V'tirin shehidliku oto ayidei pshute klei eitz ad kan lashono. The Re'em answered that they used long, simple pieces of wood. What's long, simple piece of wood? A pshute. It means a rod, but it's made out of wood. Ad kan lashono. Says the Maharsha, ve'in ze maspik. Devi kol makom kaven dekulan Tmei Meitim hayu heach nichnas hamadlik b'mikdash betuma. If they're all Tmeim, how is the guy who's lighting the candles going into the Heichal?
Right.
You can't go in if you're Tameh. So he's Tameh, he's going in. Valkein, Nira, therefore it seems, Dilohayu Kulan Tmei Meitim. Ela Me'eza Sibahaya, Shlayalahem Shemen Tahor. Really, they weren't all really Tmei Meitim. There must have been people who were not Tmei Meitim. They didn't actually fight. They brought in other people, ringers or whatever. But for some reason, they did not have the pure oil. And then the nace was that they found one cruse of oil because there was no other pure oil to be had. The oil was available, but it's a 4-day journey. 4 days there, 4 days back. So that's 8 days. Ayin Sham. Ubezed yeshev nami masha hikshe haraim. This will also answer the question of the re'im. He'achi liku b'menorah tmeya. How did they light the menorah in a state of tumah? The answer is some people weren't tmeim. That must be the answer. Ayin Sham. Dahashta kaven de lo hayu kulan tmei metim hayulchon lasot menorah chadasha. Since not everyone's tmei metim, they can make a new menorah. Because if we say the menorah was gone, someone had to make the menorah. Who can't be tamei people, so it was Torah people who did it.
So they weren't Chashmonaim at that point.
The Chashmonaim, they could have been part of the Chashmonaim. They weren't the fighters of the Chashmonaim. They were the rear guard of the Chashmonaim. They were the supply chain people, right? An army needs supply people. It needs jobniks. It needs all kinds of people who are not necessarily in the fighting. Maybe that's Tmei Meitim. But he wrote that he thought everybody was Tmei Meitim, the Re'em Arishon, and now the Maharsha is taking it on. V'yesh lomar, shayu osim menorah shel eitz. Kidetane perakol etzlamim. Right? He had answered that really, the Re'em said, every single person was Tamei Meit, therefore they made it out of wood. As it says in Perakol etzlamim, we're not looking at that one, that's in Masechet Avodah Zarah. It's in Avodah Zarah, Menachot, and here in our Gemara Rosh Hashanah. So Ri Omer Shel Eitz, that's Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda. Shel Eitz Lo Yaseh Kederach Shasu Beit Chashmonai. Don't make it out of wood in the way that Beit Chashmonai did. So the Re'em wanted to argue that is because they could only make it out of wood because they were all Tmei Meitim. He thinks everybody was Tmei Meitim. If you made it out of wood, the wood isn't susceptible to Tumah. That's the claim. Ayin Sham. But the Maharsha says to the Re'em, but if you make something out of wood and it has a receptacle to receive liquid, so guess what? It's susceptible to tumah again. Wood is susceptible to tumah. It's not susceptible to tumah when it's just flat out pieces of wood, unformed. But when you make it into something and it has a receptacle, which it had to have, where you're going to put the oil. Virinami, Rabbi Yosinami lo ka'amar, dahaya shel eitz, elimishum, dahaya beit chashmonai aniyim. The reason why they made it out of wood was not because of tumah and taro, is because they were poor. They couldn't afford to make it out of metal. That's why. V'yesh liyashu, says the Maharsha, lefi darko, according to his idea, shahaya menorah shel eitz, asuya kvar biyad mishahu, b'makom acher, v'lo nitma asham, v'nathlua al yedei pshute klei eitz, v'nasu ala mikdash. So if I want to go according to the logic, a little bit of what the Re'em had said to salvage it, says the Maharsha, it must be that someone had already created in their own home a wooden menorah, exact replica of the golden menorah that had been stolen by the Greeks. It was carried on sticks, held by the Tamei people, but on sticks, elevated, either as staves or whatever it was, so they wouldn't actually touch it. Yeah? V'tzarich lomer da'oto ha'ish she'asa'a kvar ketavni menorah gam b'shel eitz asa'a be'isur l'Rabbi Yossi shel eitz nami asur meribui dekra v'drosh v'chakor. Meaning, you have to say that the person who made that menorah in his house had done it to spec of the actual menorah, and he violated a halacha according to Rabbi Yossi, wasn't allowed to do it. But once it was made, and they didn't have a choice, and they didn't have a menorah, they carried his over to the Mikdash, and people who were not Tamei, that's Maharsha's claim, there must have been some non-Tamei people. Doesn't agree with the idea that everyone was Tamei. Because if every single person is Tamei, so what if you found a cruise of oil that's kosher? You're going to lift it up, it's not kosher anymore. It's Tamei. So they were being Tamei themselves. There must have been people who were still Tahorim, and it must be that the claim that there was a wooden menorah is not related to Tumah Tara because there's a Kli Kibul, it didn't work anyway. So what must it be? It must be that there was some guy who had made it, Oto Aish, who made it, not Oto Aish, but an Oto Aish means that guy who made it. They went to his house, they lifted it up with pieces of wood, and they carried it to the Mikdash, and that's what they were lighting. But the point is, it quotes from the Gemara, our Gemara, which is also parallel Gemara Menachot, and also in Avodah Zarah. And it's just a mind-boggling idea, yeah? And we don't think of these, the nuts and bolts. So I left myself 3 minutes, flip the page, the Aruch LaNer of Yaakov Atlinger. There's no way I could get through this whole thing if I was Superman.
He's pretty fast.
We'll try and see if I can be fast. I don't think I can get too far. The Aruch LaNer of Yaakov Atlinger, also an Achron. I'm by the arrow on the bottom right-hand side of the page. Wait for it. Wait for it. Hold on. There's an arrow right there. 1 second. This didn't work out, but it will. I promise it will. Arach Laner. I'll put it on screen for the on-screen people. The other one I just didn't have. I'm sorry. I messed up. I forgot to give it. Here's the Arach Laner for the people on the screen. Minimize that. Go in here. There's no arrow online, but it's here. Sham Amud Bet. This paragraph. Okay. So Sham Amud Bet is Chaf Dal Amud Bet. Big Gemara. Kedel Shas Ben Chashmai. Hamar Shachi. They say I got it. Piers Ben Mohammed Likin. Heavy Diver Haraim. Sheikh Shakeven Tekulam Ayutmei Meitim. Shemitam Zeh Lo Hayicholim Lasot Shemenat Chet Yomim. Val Kain Hayanes Chanukah Hayah Hayum Adlikim B'Tahara. The nace really, according to the Marsha, says the Aruch Laner was that how could they actually light it B'Tahara since even the menorah was tamei and all the people were tamei. Shari timu ha-menorah. But here it's the answer given. Shasu shel eitz vidli kubo ucharabi Yosef bar Yehuda dehacha ayin sham. Remember, that's what we just saw. Yeah, there must be. There was a wooden one, and they brought that, but it wasn't. You know, he was really quoting the quote was really from the Re'im that was how they brought it, etc. He said it had nothing to do with tumentar, it had to do with them being poor. But okay. The Kati Kashal Tanakama, the post of Shal Eitz. Right? So the Tanakama, not Rabbi Yosef Yehuda, thinks that if you make it out of wood, it's not kosher. V'lachein Katav Bein Tanakama Bein Lari. Beri Itlan Lameimar Dloya Efshar Lahem El B'Shivrei Klei Cheres. According to the Reem, what they make it out of? Out of broken pieces of pottery. Ayin Sham. I mean, that's like we just finished saying that's the one thing everyone agrees you can't make it out of. Yeah? Even though made out of clay is possible according to everybody, since there was no other choice. Tanakama does not hold like Rabbi Yosef Yehuda. You can make the menorah out of it. He thinks you cannot. It's possible anyway. Made out of the pottery already because they were stuck. That's why the Chachamim said to him, there's a proof. They answered him, no, it's really made out of iron rods. Vilich Ora, top of the next column. Vilich Ora. Hold on. Vilich Ora Dochak Lomar Sheri to Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, Amar, Sheker, Ali B'the Chachamim, Shlos Menoras Shel Eitz. All right. According to the Chachamim, was Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda lying when he said it made out of wood? V'od, the Lashon Misham Raya, when it says, from there you bring a proof. V'chol makom hu b'nichuta. It's usually said not as a challenge, but it's something supportive. Shemivin Raya l'divrei, shepasul psul shal eitz, shepasul shal eitz. K'mo shekatav b'sifrei sukkah. On daf bet. Uma Raya hizu. What I wrote, it says in my book, and sukkah. Okay. What is this proof? Aval pi hanizkar la'el yesh lomar devade emet haya she'asu shal eitz b'yemei Chanukah shedainu t'mei meitim mishum tuma mizamuchach Rabbi Yosef bar Yehuda shal eitz kasher dim lokein heichid liku b'shal eitz the dochag lomar kevan she the afshar b'inen acher hayim machzirin kimo shekatav marsha. So really what's going on is that they really did make it out of wood according to Rabbi Yosef bar Yehuda on Chanukah because they were Tmei Meitim, and that's how he was proving that it was kosher because clearly they made it out of that, right? Because if not that way, so how did they make it out of wood if it's not allowed to be made out of wood? You can't say oh they were machzir it. It's too much. They answered Rabbi Yosef bar Yehuda, no. The other Rabbi Misham Raya Lidvarenu. That proves our point. It must have been rods of iron. Perish. Kshenitaharu hayu os shpurin shel barzel v'chipum bebedil ve'im haya shel eitz kasher lama lo hinichu menorah shel eitz. Yeah. Al korachach the shel eitz pasol uv'yimei Chanukah rak mipnei adchak hidliku ba k'mo shekatav marsha v'shel cheres vade pasol. I mean, this is just revolutionary. The Aruch Laner claims that the dialogue going on in Chav Da'adam at Bet is Rabbi Yosef Yehuda says, you know, when the Beit Chashmonai came, they had to make a menorah out of wood. And the Chachamim say, is that some kind of a proof? You know, they really made it out of iron poles. The Aruch Laner says, first, the Chachamim agree, they admit that Rabbi Yosef Yehuda is right, that historically it was first made out of wood. That's not really kosher, but they know their choice. So they resorted to making it out of wood. But as soon as they could upgrade, what was the first upgrade? At least to metal rods, iron rods, which then they covered in tin. Later on, they made it out of silver. Later on, they made it out of gold when they were stronger economically.
They could.
In other words, it's not a dispute between these two what actually happened. The Chachamim admit, Rabbi Yosef Yehuda, that it started with a wooden menorah. But they say that's no proof because you're bringing me a proof from an exigency, from a historical exigency, from an emergency situation where there was no choice. Don't bring me a proof from there. That doesn't mean that you're actually allowed to make the menorah in the Makom HaMikdash out of wood. It's just they really didn't have a choice. I mean, it asks also cast Hanukkah, this according to Aruch there, in a different light, pardon the pun, but the way you see it now is like, okay, so really there were so many different phases. They made this menorah, they made that menorah. It's like your kid, if you're zocha, to have a kid in your life is something, or maybe you, when you were a child, you have a nephew, a niece, a friend's child. They come with a Chanukiah they made in school. It's very childlike.
Mm-hmm.
Turns out it might be along the lines of what happened when they first came. They made it out of wood. In my house, if the kid ever came with a wooden menorah, I was like, we were not really going to like this. It's like a fire hazard and it doesn't make any sense. But Zaystach in the first year, it sounds like Zemayesh.
What was the emergency that the very first thing they had to do was make the menorah?
The symbolism of the victory and lighting the menorah was of paramount importance.
So they waited until there was a complete victory, or until they chased him out of Yerushalayim?
So they chased him out of Yerushalayim.
Yeah.
But that was the raising of the flag, was the lighting of the menorah. An excellent shir on the subject in Hashkafa, Mori V'Rabi Menachem Liptek last Thursday. It's recorded. I sent it on Friday. The link,
Yeah.
incredible. And there's references there to our Gemara and Rosh Hashanah about solstice and equinox and whatever. So he keeps going. He says, Bari, Rabbi Yosef Bar Rabbi Huda, Yishlomit Lo Poliga Chachamim. He's not really arguing against the Chachamim. She'achar kach asu shel barzel. He's not arguing that later on they made it out of iron. Mikumakom svar le'dein raya misham d'shel eitz pasul el shel barzel adif mishel eitz. He agrees. They all agree to the sequence of what happened here. The question is, in the first phase, was it really just puzzle, but they did whatever they could? Or Rabbi Yosef says, no, it's also kosher. It just wasn't ideal. How could they have gone in anyway? Right? To light the menorah. If they're ultimate matim lefianu daiti lo kashamita, it's not really a question. The hudruli kanas betuma that laka ner hayu mi korbanot shekavu alahem zman shedocha shabbat betuma uchmas kat of a Rambam bilchot mirim musafim umade amrinan shayavanim timu kol hashmanim tzarich lomar sheyat too much sheretz unavela shelo hudra betzibur. We have a halacha psuka that tuma hudra betzibur. It's tumut mate. Everybody was tamei. Really tuma hudra betzibur. You could really offer a korban if every single person is tamei. But if it's a tuma sheretz and tuma nevela, that must be the kind of tuma that the enemy had put into the mikdash and on them. So that then it's they wouldn't be allowed really to go into the makom mikdash. Anyway,
We know they brought pigs, right? They sacrificed pigs.
Yeah. So again, the whole thing. I'm very sorry. I'm sorry to cut off like a cliffhanger, but I have no choice because there are people waiting in my house. So
But the whole reason
we'll pick it up next week on Hanukkah. But this gives you a pathway. Like, oh my goodness, it's unbelievable what we have going on here. We have all sorts of things related to Hanukkah, and look at the Hashgacha Pratis. That's what we're up to in our Gemara. Min Shemayim.
But essentially, the whole reason why they had
I'll count for tonight, gentlemen.
the whole reason
Do we meet
why they
again?
had the